What if a simple act of kindness could change a billionaire's life forever? A billionaire mother watches her son laugh for the first time in months, thanks to a poor gardener. But what she didn't know was that gardener had a secret. Stay tuned to find out what happens next on Innocent Stories. If you're just tuning into Innocent Stories, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Also, tell us where you're watching from. Miriam sat at her lavish desk in her home office, her face buried in her hands. Hot tears poured down her cheeks as her shoulders shook. The sound of her son's screams tore through the mansion. Not the kind of scream a child makes during a tantrum, but the deep, sharp, heart-wrenching kind that comes from real pain. Miriam could still hear their voices, her ex-husband, his mother. Their words refused to leave her head. "You're a terrible mother. You don't deserve this boy. Your carelessness has ruined his life. All you think about is money. Money. Power. Power. You're not fit to be a mother." Her hands shook as she tried to block out the sound of Julian's cries. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was a terrible mother, because it was her fault. Her son, her only source of joy, had run into the road chasing his football and gotten hit by a car. A car that left him with injuries that changed his life forever. How could one moment destroy everything? She couldn't bear to watch anymore. She had run out of his room the moment they started his physiotherapy session, and locked herself inside her office. Now she sat there alone, as guilt swallowed her alive. It all started 3 months ago. That day was supposed to be like every other day. Miriam picked Julian up from his soccer practice. He was excited, sweaty, smiling, his eyes shining like someone who had already seen his future in the Premier League. He was the star player of his team. Everyone said so. He had big dreams, and Miriam was proud of him. As they walked to the car that day, Julian looked up at her and said confidently, "Mama, when I enter the big leagues, I'll buy you a mansion with a swimming pool inside your room, and your bathroom will have a TV." Miriam laughed and ruffled his hair. "Just make sure my house doesn't float away with too much enjoyment." Oh. That boy had big dreams, and an even bigger heart. She had promised herself that day would be just about him. But she made one mistake. She forgot an important file at her office in Banana Island, something she needed to work on that night. So, she decided to quickly stop by and pick it up before heading home. They arrived at the office. Julian was carrying his favorite football in his backpack. She held his hand tightly, and they went up to her 21st floor office. It only took a minute to get the file. As they came out of the building and were heading to the car, Julian pointed across the road. "Mama, I want ice cream," he said with a sweet smile. Miriam looked at the ice cream parlor opposite the building. She should have said no. She should have gone home. But she smiled and said, "Okay, baby. Just one scoop, and we head home." "Deal, Mama." "I love you," Julian beamed. She smiled back. That boy was her world. They crossed the road together. Julian said he wanted chocolate flavor with some toppings. Miriam nodded, turned to bring out her card to pay. It was just 1 second. She collected the ice cream and turned around to hand it to him, but he was gone. He had been right beside her. She looked around confused. "Julian, baby. Guju, where are you?" she called. Then she heard it, a loud crash. Then people screaming. She dropped the ice cream and ran outside like a madwoman. What she saw next sent her straight to heaven and brought her back to earth in 1 second. Julian was lying in the middle of the road, motionless, his body soaked in blood. People were gathered around him. His football was a few steps away near the gutter. Someone shouted, he was chasing the ball. Another person said, the car didn't stop. The driver just drove off. Miriam let out a scream so loud it could have made a deaf person regain their hearing. She ran and fell to her knees beside her son. "Julian, my baby, somebody help me. Please, somebody call an ambulance." Tears poured down her face as she held him in her arms. His body was limp. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even breathing properly. At the hospital, the doctors rushed him to the ER. Miriam sat on the cold corridor floor, her hands shaking, her heart racing like it wanted to escape from her chest. She prayed every prayer she knew from Genesis to Revelation in under a minute. God, please take my life instead. Please, just don't take my son. She didn't know how long she waited. Then the doctor came out of the ER with a calm but serious face. Madam, your son's condition is quite critical. He had several internal injuries. We've done our best to stabilize him. We'll know more when he regains consciousness. Miriam nodded slowly, then passed out. 1 month later, Julian woke up. Miriam had stayed by his side day and night. He opened his eyes and whispered, "Mama." She burst into tears, but her joy didn't last long. The doctor called her in again and said his spinal cord was affected. There's a 50-50 chance he may not walk again. With good therapy, maybe, but I have to be honest. It won't be easy. Miriam's world shattered again. She excused herself and went to the hospital toilet, locked the door, sat on the floor, and cried until her throat went dry. Then came her ex-husband, Faye, and his mother and his sister. They didn't come to comfort her. They came with words that burned. You're cursed. You killed your parents, and now you want to kill this boy. You should be ashamed of yourself. Miriam sat silently. She didn't argue. Her heart was already bleeding. She told herself she deserved the insults. After 3 long months in the hospital, Julian was discharged. But things didn't get better. They got worse. Julian refused to eat, refused to smile. He stopped playing his video games. He stopped watching cartoons. He didn't want to see his friends. He would just sit in his wheelchair staring out the window at the football pitch Miriam had built for him in the backyard. He refused to attend therapy. He screamed and cried whenever the nurses tried to work with him. He was angry, tired, and completely shut down. And Miriam watched her son disappear in front of her. She stood outside his room some nights just to hear him breathe. Some nights she would cry right there on the floor. Before all this happened, Miriam Adekuna was known as a powerhouse. She inherited AD Corporations from her grandparents after her parents died, and took it to even greater heights. She expanded into real estate, telecoms, and cryptocurrency. She was bold, respected, and feared. Then she met Faye, tall, dark, charming. He swept her off her feet. For a moment, she thought she had it all. Marriage, a healthy son, a thriving company. But reality slapped her when she caught Faye in bed with their housemaid. She had told him she was traveling to Abuja, but the flight was cancelled. She came home with 3-year-old Julian in her arms, and walked into the room to find him and the maid in the act. He cried and begged, blaming the maid. She seduced me. I don't know what happened. Miriam forgave him. She didn't want to raise Julian alone. But the cheating didn't stop. Faye slept with his secretary, then with her secretary, and then somehow with half the female staff in the building. Miriam became the subject of office gossip. Then came the betrayal that broke her. Her grandfather called her one day and said, "Faye is embezzling funds. He has secret accounts, and he's planning to take the company from you." Faye had bought over some board members, but thanks to her grandfather's influence, the coup failed. Faye and the corrupt board members were thrown out. Miriam filed for divorce, and she wanted to jail him, but Julian cried and said, "Mommy, please forgive Daddy." And she did. She let it go. Now here she was, sitting in silence, drowning in pain. Julian could no longer walk. And Miriam no longer knew who she was. But what she didn't know was that very soon, a man would walk into her life, not with flowers, not with fancy promises, but with a machete and a football. And from that moment on, everything would change on Innocent Stories. It had been 1 month since Julian came home from the hospital. Miriam couldn't trust herself to leave him for even 1 second again. She moved her entire company operations into her home office. AD Corporations would now be managed from her mansion, because her eyes must be on her son 24/7. She turned her entire house into a medical center, hired the best nurses, therapists, and house staff money could buy. But no matter how much she spent, one thing remained the same. Julian was still not smiling, still not laughing, still not speaking unless he had to. He ate only when begged, and went for therapy like someone being taken to the gallows. One quiet afternoon, while Miriam was in her home office staring at her laptop without reading anything, there was a gentle knock on her door. "Come in," she said flatly. Mama Ada stepped in, quiet as always, calm like she was floating, and smelling faintly of robin dettel. She was in her early 60s, wrapped in her usual clean Ankara, and carried herself like the chief judge of the compound. She had been with Miriam since before Julian could walk. Miriam had begged her to retire, but Mama Ada refused and said, "If I stop working, my body will rust, and my brain will freeze. I'd rather die with mop in hand than rot in a rocking chair." So Miriam promoted her to house manager. That afternoon, Mama Ada stood in the doorway and said gently, "Mama Guju, the gardener has quit." Miriam looked up for the first time in hours. "What happened?" she asked. "He fell very sick and traveled to his village. His family called last week to say he won't be returning. The grasses have almost taken over our beds, and the flowers are now tall as an iroko tree. The whole backyard is beginning to look like a witch's farm. We need a new gardener, Ma." Miriam sighed and waved her hand. "Go ahead, hire someone. Anyone. I don't care. Just let the compound stop looking like a haunted forest." "Yes, Ma," Mama Ada said, and quietly walked out. 2 days later, a tall, dark, muscular man walked through the mansion gate with a cutlass in one hand and confidence in the other. His name was Agoy. From the minute he entered, the compound changed. By afternoon, he had cleared the front lawn, trimmed the hedges, and reshaped the flowers like he was performing surgery. Within hours, the house surroundings looked like a five-star hotel in Dubai. Mama Ada stood by the window watching him, and nodded like a prophetess who just got a divine confirmation. "This one is not an ordinary gardener," she whispered to herself. The next morning, Mama Ada called him aside. "Young man, I want you to help maintain the small football pitch at the backyard near the boys' window. Just trim the grass and clean it up a bit." "Yes, Ma," Agoy said with a smile. He went there with his cutlass and started working. As he was raking the edges of the pitch, he spotted something round under the hedge. A football. It was old, slightly deflated, but still proud. It was Julian's football, the same one he had tossed out of the window weeks ago during a moment of frustration. Agoy dusted it and smiled like he had just found treasure. And that's when it started. He walked into the middle of the pitch and started bouncing the ball around. But it was very obvious from the beginning. Agoy could not play football to save his life. Every kick was off. Every bounce was crooked. He looked like someone doing punishment instead of play. He tried to dribble and fell down on his backside with a heavy thud that even the grass felt. But he stood up, dusted himself, and tried again. He kept kicking and missing. And up in the window, watching silently, was Julian. At first, he stared. Then he raised one eyebrow. Then without warning, he let out a small laugh, and then a bigger laugh for the first time in weeks. Julian laughed when Agoy attempted a Cristiano Ronaldo spin and almost broke his own waist. Julian laughed so hard his nurse dropped her phone in shock. The boy who hadn't laughed in a month was now laughing so loud the house echoed. From that day, something changed. Every morning after doing his regular garden rounds, Agoy would stroll to the pitch and begin his ritual of terrible football. And every morning, Julian would sit by his window waiting, eyes sharp, face ready. It became their secret show. Julian would giggle and laugh as Agoy fell, grunted, fumbled, kicked nothing, or celebrated a fake goal. It was the only thing that brought joy back to the house. 2 weeks later, something shocking happened. Julian called his nurse and said, "Please, can you take me to the pitch for fresh air?" The nurse stood still like a statue. Her mouth flew open so wide that flies nearly held a meeting inside. She blinked like someone whose brain needed a reboot. Julian, the same boy who hadn't stepped outside in weeks. She recovered quickly before her shock became permanent. "Oh, okay. I'll get the wheelchair." Within minutes, they wheeled him out to the pitch. Agoy was already there as usual, juggling the football with no skill or shame. Julian rolled closer and said, "Excuse me, sir. You're so terrible at football. You play like a 1-year-old." Agoy burst into laughter. "Ah, I'm sorry I'm boring you. When I was small, my mother said I had chewing stick legs. She banned me from football and sent me to go and learn how to fry a car instead." Julian laughed again. "But your legs look fine to me." "They only look fine now because I ate too much yam and beans when I was growing up." "Does yam and beans make someone's leg thick?" Julian asked, giggling. "Oh, yes. Yam and beans is packed with vitamin W, X, Y, and Z. It's very powerful." Julian burst into uncontrollable laughter and almost fell off his wheelchair. "Vitamin W, X, Y, Z. There's no such thing." "Ah, it's not in your textbook, young man. You learned that one from experience and old age." The two of them were laughing like old friends. From that day, Julian started requesting to go outside more often. Agoy would dribble terribly, fall on purpose, shout, "Go," even when he missed, and Julian would correct him and laugh until his stomach hurt. From her study upstairs, Miriam heard the laughter. At first, she thought her ears were deceiving her. She got up and walked to the window. There down below, she saw her son laughing freely. She squinted. A man was on the pitch with him. "Who's that man?" she muttered. She walked to her intercom and pressed the button. "Mama Ada, please come to my office." Few minutes later, Mama Ada appeared. "Mama, who is that man my son is laughing with?" she asked. Mama Ada walked to the window, peeped, and smiled. "Ah, that's our new gardener. His name is Agoy. Very hard-working child. Since he came, the compound has been shining like mirror. He's a good man." Miriam didn't reply. Her eyes stayed fixed on Julian's laughter. Her heart wanted to protect him from everyone, but her mind told her to take a chill pill and let whatever this was continue. One hot Friday afternoon, Julian had been wheeled back inside after another round of football comedy from Agoy. He was smiling, laughing, and even cracking small jokes with the nurse. Miriam, as usual, had watched everything from her upstairs study like a hawk in heels. She didn't know how to feel. Something was shifting. Julian was getting better. Not physically alone, but emotionally. But the trigger, the source, the cause of this unexpected recovery, a man with chewing stick legs and fake Ronaldo skills. Miriam closed her laptop and picked up her office intercom like a woman about to start an investigation. "Mama Ada," she said into the speaker. "Please tell that new gardener, what's his name again?" "Agoy, Ma," Mama Ada's voice replied gently. "Yes, that one. Tell him I want to see him in my office now." "Okay, Ma." She dropped the receiver slowly, folded her arms, and waited. Agoy knocked and stepped into the office like someone who wasn't intimidated by mahogany desks or air-conditioned silence. He stood straight. No fidgeting, no cap in hand, no bending or shifting. Just confidence, clean t-shirt, brown hands, and grass stains on his trousers. "Good afternoon, Ma," he said. Miriam looked up from her chair and gave a polite nod, her tone cool like freezer breeze. "Mr. Agoy, please have a seat." "I'm fine standing, Ma." Miriam raised one brow slightly. "All right, then. I called you here to say thank you." Agoy blinked. "Once." "Thank you?" he asked. "Yes," Miriam replied, folding her arms. "My son hasn't smiled in a month since you started. Whatever it is you're doing on that pitch, he's been eating, sleeping better, and actually laughing again." "I appreciate that." Agoy gave a small respectful nod. "It's nothing, Ma. I just want him to be happy again." Miriam opened her drawer slowly and pulled out a white envelope. The kind of envelope that has weight. She stretched it toward him. "This is for you. Just to say thank you." Use it to buy something for yourself or get new boots. Agoy didn't move. He stared at the envelope like it was a snake with teeth. Ma, with all due respect, I don't need your money. Miriam's hand froze midair. Excuse me? I'm not playing with Julian because I want a tip. My salary is enough. I just want to see him get better. The room went silent. Miriam slowly dropped the envelope back on her desk. Her eyes changed from soft gratitude to sharp caution. Mr. Agoy, she said slowly. I don't know what ideas you're putting into my son's head, but he now believes he'll walk again. He told me you said so. That's because I believe it, Agoy replied calmly. Believe? She scoffed. Are you a doctor? No, a physiotherapist? No, Ma. Then what are you? His therapist or his Messi? Agoy didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. I'm someone who believes hope is stronger than pain, he said. Your son is trying because someone believes in him. That's all. Miriam's voice rose slightly. So you think I don't believe in my son? I think you believe in what doctors say more than what your son needs to hear. That one entered hot. Miriam dropped her pen and sat up straight. Are you seriously standing in my office, inside my house, telling me how to raise my child? I'm only saying he needs encouragement, not reminders of what might go wrong. Miriam's hand slapped the desk lightly. You know what? Maybe this job is making you too bold. Maybe we need a gardener who knows how to stay in his lane. At that moment, she expected him to stammer, to apologize, to beg for his job, to fidget like most of her staff would. But Agoy didn't even blink. If you feel my services are no longer needed, please go ahead and fire me, he said calmly. If that'll make you feel in control again. And Miriam leaned back slightly, her mouth slightly open. This man, this gardener, this football comedian had just stood toe-to-toe with her, boldly, calmly, without fear for the first time in years. She was speechless. Agoy gave a respectful nod. If that's all, Ma, I'd like to return to my duty post as the gardener. He emphasized the word deliberately, like pepper inside jollof. And with that, he turned and walked out. No drama, no shouting, no apology, just silent thunder. Miriam sat frozen for 10 seconds. She stared at the closed door. Her heart was pumping small. Who did he think he was? No one, no man had ever stood up to her like that. Not board members, not directors, not even Faye in his proudest moments. And yet this one with grass stains on his trousers had stood in front of her like an equal. She should be angry. She should call security. But instead, her brain was saying strange things like, he has strong hands. Shab, wait, how old is he again? She shook her head violently like she was rebuking spiritual attack. No, it wasn't like that. She was just curious. That's all. She told herself it was nothing. That she was just being polite, concerned, observant. And yet, every day after that conversation, she found herself standing by the window a little longer, watching Julian laugh, and watching the man who made him laugh. She told herself it was just interest, but deep down, something had started. Something dangerous. Julian's days began to shift from quiet, gloomy hours into bursts of joy and discovery. A few weeks after the football pitch laughter began, Miriam made the decision to start his homeschooling properly. The accident had taken a lot from him, but she was determined that it wouldn't take his education, too. She hired the best private tutors, bought every resource they recommended, and converted part of the library into Julian's personal classroom. But it wasn't just academics that helped Julian blossom. Agoy quickly became a part of everything. He wasn't just the man who made Julian laugh or played football badly. He became his biggest cheerleader. He sat with him through hard math lessons, helped him sound out difficult words, and acted out scenes from history books just to make it fun. When assignments confused Julian, it was Agoy who'd jump in with wild dramatic examples that made everything suddenly make sense. If Napoleon Bonaparte was in this mansion, he would have declared war on your meat pie by now, Agoy once joked, making Julian laugh till he nearly fell off his wheelchair. Every afternoon after classes, Agoy would wheel Julian around the estate for fresh air. Julian loved those rides. He would point at birds, gossip about his tutors, or just sit quietly while Agoy told funny stories from his childhood. Miriam always followed them. She never admitted she was tagging along because of Agoy. She'd claim she wanted to observe Julian's movement schedule, but really, she was watching him. This man who walked into her life as a gardener was now a constant in her son's world. From her study upstairs, Miriam often stood by the window, arms folded, eyes narrowed in thought. "Who is this man?" she would whisper. She had paid all the professionals in the world to heal her son. Yet this total stranger had done something they couldn't. He gave Julian laughter, confidence, and hope. Her heart, once locked away in layers of pain and suspicion, was starting to soften. One evening, as Julian and Agoy laughed loudly over a football quiz on TV, Miriam descended the stairs and stood by the dining area. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Agoy," she said, folding her arms. Agoy paused, startled. "Yes, Ma. Would you like to join us for dinner?" Agoy blinked. "No, thank you, Ma. I still have some things to do outside." Miriam wasn't surprised. He was still clearly holding on to the way she had insulted him during their office encounter. Before she could respond, Julian turned to Agoy, eyes wide with excitement. "Please stay. Please. I've never eaten dinner with someone so funny. Mommy can burn food with her stare when she eats alone. But when you're around, she smiles more." Miriam's mouth flew open so white flies could have hosted a naming ceremony in there. Julian pouted, "Please, please, please." With a reluctant smile, Agoy finally nodded. "Okay, buddy. Just this once." That just once turned into every evening. Dinner became their bonding ritual. Miriam cooked sometimes. Julian picked the movies to talk about. And Agoy, with all his foolishness, filled the room with laughter. They ate like a family. Only that they weren't one. Not yet. After Julian had gone to bed, Miriam would sometimes find herself sitting in the living room with a glass of wine while Agoy sat across from her. They talked, really talked, about her sleepless nights, about her broken marriage, about how she almost lost herself when Julian had the accident. Agoy would listen quietly, sometimes cracking a joke, sometimes saying nothing at all. But his presence was comforting. He shared stories too, about growing up in a crowded home with a grandmother who used her cane like a microphone. He never mentioned a wife or girlfriend. Miriam never asked, but the air between them grew thicker with something unspoken. Then, just like that, it all shattered. One quiet morning, as birds chirped like nothing could go wrong, Agoy knocked on Miriam's office door. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mr. Football Legend." But his face was different. "I came to tender my resignation letter, Ma," he said softly. The smile vanished from her face. "I don't understand," she said. "There's a family emergency. I need to go." Her heart dropped into her stomach. But you didn't say anything. When are you leaving?" "Today." The world tilted. Miriam held the edge of her desk like her balance had been slapped away. "But Julian, you promised him." "I'll keep in touch," Agoy said softly. "I'll visit. I swear." Miriam's voice cracked. "So that's it. You'll just go." When Julian found out, he cried for the first time in weeks. His voice broke as he shouted, "You promised. You said you'd stay till I walk again." "I'm not walking yet, Mr. Agoy." Agoy knelt before him, his own eyes misty. "I know, buddy, but I promise I'll see you soon." And just like that, he was gone. The house became a graveyard. No more terrible football in the backyard. No more wine and soft laughter in the living room. No more yelling, "Go!" from Julian's room. Silence moved in and unpacked all its bags. Julian stayed strong. He ate. He studied. He even told his mom, "When I get into the big leagues, I'll buy you a mansion, Mommy." But Miriam was broken. Every time she walked past the garden, her chest ached. One evening, as she sat in her study with the curtains drawn, she whispered the words that hung in the air like a ghost. They always leave. Weeks turned into months. No call, no text. The number he gave them switched off, but Julian believed. He'll come back, Mommy. He promised me. And Miriam, she waited too. Even if she pretended not to. The mansion had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that crawls into your bones and makes even the clocks tick louder. That they weren't there. Since that's ago left, something had changed. It had been 3 months had passed, and it felt like 3 years ago. Julian no longer laughed during therapy anymore. He still asked about him, ago. Still believed with all his heart that Agoy would come back. He still looked out the window like he was waiting for a child. Miriam, on the other hand, looking at the same gate, had hoped to shut it all out. She buried herself in work and convinced herself it was foolishness to hope. He didn't owe us anything, she whispered to herself under her breath. We were just convenient. But even as she tried to act strong, nothing could change the fact there were nights when she stood at the balcony with a glass of wine, looking at the gate like she was waiting for a ghost to see Ago for. Nights she remembered those his laughter, silly jokes, those nights his bold eyes, those his annoying but charming that confidence. Nights she wished she had said more wishes, or maybe less. Then one quiet Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Mama Ada went to open it and screamed so loud that Miriam almost dropped her cup of tea upstairs. Jesus is Lord! Is this you? Miriam ran down the stairs like she was being chased by fire. When she reached the front door, her mouth flew open so wide that flies nearly picked it as a maternity ward. Standing there, like a dream wrapped in a tuxedo, was Agoy. But this wasn't the gardener. This was a man glowing with wealth, power, and something else. Confidence that could blind a proud man. His suit looked like it was stitched by angels. His shoes polished to the heavens. His beard lined like he came from a billionaire convention. Agoy was no longer just Agoy. He was a full-blown CEO. Before she could even think, Miriam leapt into his arms like a baby monkey and burst into tears. How could you do this to us? You promised to keep in touch. You didn't call. You didn't visit. I mean, Julian has been waiting for you. Agoy held her tight like she was the last jaw of rice on the planet. I'm sorry, baby girl, he said, voice low and soft. Things got more complicated at home. But I'm here now for good. After a long hug that could have lasted till next week, Mama Ada cleared her throat dramatically, reminding the two lovebirds that she was still very much alive and standing there. Miriam pulled away, wiped her tears, and rushed upstairs to Julian's room. When she opened the door, she found Julian by the window, staring out like always. Julian, someone's here to see you, she said, her voice shaky. Julian turned slowly, eyes tired. But the moment he saw Agoy standing behind his mother, something sparked in him. The boy's eyes widened like floodlights. Then he jumped out of his wheelchair and ran. Not walked, not limped, ran. He ran so fast into Agoy's arms that everyone in the house screamed at once. Even the nurses dropped their files. Julian wrapped his arms around Agoy and laughed, cried, and screamed all at the same time. I told you I would walk again. You said I would walk, and I did it. I did it. Miriam stood at the door frozen. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a talking drum. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from sadness this time, but pure, raw joy. Later that evening, as the sun began to rest, the three of them sat on the balcony. Julian had eaten the biggest dinner of his life and fallen asleep halfway through dessert. Miriam poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Agoy, and they sat in silence for a while, just watching the sky. Then Agoy spoke. I'm not just a gardener, Miriam. I never was. I'm the CEO of Aurelian Group. It's a multinational company. We do tech, construction, and investment. Bigger than your company, actually. Miriam choked on her wine. Wait, what? I signed up to be a gardener because I wanted to disappear. I wanted to take a break, experience life as a regular man. That's why I signed up at the agency. When they posted me to your mansion, I agreed. No strings, no privileges, just a man with a cutlass and a wheelbarrow. Miriam stared at him. So, you've been rich this whole time? He nodded. My grandmother knew everything. She warned me not to fall in love, but when I went back, the first thing she asked was, "So, when are you marrying that fierce fine woman and her son?" Miriam's mouth was still open. Does your grandma know me? Agoy laughed. That woman? She knows everything. Before I even sat down when I got home, she told me all about you. She said, and I quote, "That Miriam girl, she's fire and thunder. Marry her, or I'll disown you." Miriam burst into laughter. Did she really say that? Agoy leaned in and gently kissed her cheek. If you'll let me trim your flowers, mow your lawn, and fix your broken fence forever, I'll be the happiest man alive. Miriam blushed like a schoolgirl caught passing love notes. Are you proposing to me right now? Yes. Will you let me be your gardener for life? Just like that? No courtship, no dates. Woman, please. Agoy laughed. We've been dating since you first invited me for dinner. You just didn't know it. They both laughed so hard they nearly spilled the wine. A few months later, Miriam and Julian moved into Agoy's mansion. Julian continued therapy with the best physiotherapist Agoy could find, and every evening they played football in the backyard. Miriam ran her company. Agoy ran his own. But at home, they were just a family. Husband, wife, son, and one more on the way. Miriam was 6 months pregnant. Julian stood proudly one evening and declared, "Mommy, when I enter the big leagues, I'll buy you the biggest airplane in Lagos." And Miriam, laughing and crying at once, replied, "I already have everything I need." Thank you for watching Innocent Stories. If you enjoyed watching this story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.